state your name, but you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Remaining anonymous. So, you used to work at...
Both. I was a security guard.
Okay. So you did daytime and nighttime security?
Yeah, I was 24 hours. I was on patient watch.
Okay.
So when a patient would get formed, either for self-harm or something that needed 24-hour babysitting or assistance, we would come in and watch them.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, and that's where the story begins.
Was it safe to say that more stuff happened at night than during the day, or was it kind of 50-50?
Depending on the site, it was 50-50. The old site would happen more at night, but those were the birthing unit and the pediatrics went on. It went on all day.
Mm-hmm. How long after you started working there did you start experiencing things that were a little abnormal?
Within the first month, I had started seeing stuff. The worst of it happened at the and that was just one messed up night. To elaborate on that, what had happened was I was on a patient watch. The patient had done something to get themselves arrested. So I was pulled off the patient when they left, obviously. And I was to go around with the duty guard and do checks because we were having a busy night and we didn't get our checks done. So I went into the first floor, we did our checks, everything was good. We went on the second floor, did our checks, noticed one of the staff offices was unlocked, which it's not supposed to be. Those doors are supposed to lock behind them at all times. We went in, locked the door, carried on, not thinking anything of it. So, a couple hours later, we go and do our checks again. Same door is unlocked. Now, by the looks of things, nobody had been by there. So what we had done was we set a trap. I had taken the two things on the door and flipped them up so that the room was clear. But we'd also taken a cigarette band and put it on the inside of the door so that when we closed it, it would drop and hit the floor.
Right.
So that if anybody was in there, we would know. Right. Now at that point, this had been 3 hours after, so the third time we went around, the door was unlocked, the things hadn't touched, and the cigarette foil was still there. So either somebody was just going in with the key, unlocking the door, pulling the key out and taking off was one thing. Right. But I went to the nurse's station, couldn't do it. So we went back, we locked the door, unlocked it and tried to open the door, and the door wouldn't open. It was like welded shut.
Okay.
So
it's very strange.
We tried pushing on it, couldn't get anything to open. We could physically turn the handle to the point where we knew the door was unlocked, but couldn't open the door in any way, shape, or form. At that point, we called the maintenance guy on staff. He came up and he messed around with the door. He's like, it should be opening. So we met up with a porter who used to transport patients from point A to point B, and he was a very large, muscular man. And the maintenance guy went to the door, pulled it so that it was in an unlocked position, and had the porter come and do a running kick to boot the door down. Well, when he did that, the door swung open and the vertical blinds were horizontal across the ceiling of the
window
office. So as soon as that happened, the blinds just came crashing down. Everything was a huge mess, and then it went dead silent.
Would you say that in the first moment when you opened that door and everything was up like that, would you say that there was like a stillness?
Well, there was definitely a stillness, and it was very awkward.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And was anything else, like, messed up in the room?
Nothing.
Wow.
They checked the heating to see if there was something going on with the heating. The ducts were fine. There was nothing going on. Nobody can explain why this had happened, but 4 of us saw it that night.
Wow.
And all 4 of us us were freaked out.
What was the conversation like after that?
There was no conversation. It was four full-grown men scared out of their wits. No, it didn't happen. It was just that one time. At the hospital, which is the pediatric hospital, we had an experience there the one night where it was a little kid. And we don't know the backstory from all this, but what we were told through other coworkers of ours is that there was this young boy, and he used to go around and he used to play pranks on people. You'd go to a door, he'd lock it on you. You'd do something, and there'd be a small prank involved. It was very mean, and you could tell it was a young child doing it. But it was still, what the heck. And these used to go on all the time. The one day we were just wandering through, and all of a sudden, it was like tumbleweed had moved across, but it looked like it was a rat that ran across. And we were like, stopped, looked by, and there was nothing there. And we just, okay, what the heck was that? Other coworkers of mine would explain locked doors. They'd go into a room, they'd come out, the door would be locked behind them, trying to get the door, and then they just, hey, stop it. And as soon as you'd say, hey, stop it, the pranking would stop. It was almost like the kid was scared, like a normal child would be, and he'd run away. So,
Yeah, like once an adult says, that's enough.
yeah.
Right.
They cut it out.
Yeah.
And children in the spirit world are known to be tricksters, so that's very interesting what you're saying.
Yeah. I've always been a believer through encounters that I've experienced over the years. There was at times where I didn't want to believe it, but once I looked more into it, I became more at peace with it, through research and so on and so have you. The biggest one was my dog. That's where I did all my research that was my first paranormal encounter. I had a golden retriever. We rescued him from an abusive family. And the thing about retrievers that most people know is they have bad problems with hip dysplasia. Well, this guy used to work in construction. He'd kick him in the rear end after leaving him at home for 14 hours of the day when the dog messed on the floor. So I had him for 7 years, and everything was good. And then we had him out swimming at our pond on our family farm the one day, and his hips got really bad. So we brought him to the vet a couple of days later thinking he would come out of it. No, both of his hips were out. He couldn't walk. We had to carry him. So I had to put him down. Now, being a farm boy, my uncle handed me a bullet. At 17 years old, I can admit that the tears were ripping down my eyes. I could barely hold my composure, but I did what I had to do and put my dog down. Now, it was about 6 to 8 months after I had put him down and buried him that I had experienced my first paranormal activity. I used to always sleep in the living room when we had family over for functions. So it was Thanksgiving weekend, and I was sleeping in the living room, and when I slept in the living room, he would always sleep up beside me with his head in my shoulder, kind of like Little Spoon, Big Spoon, kid and his dog. That night was the first time that we had a family gathering where he wasn't there. I woke up with sleep paralysis at that point and couldn't move for the life of me, but it was because I had a heavy pressure on my chest, and it felt like something was sitting on my chest. Now, at that point, I went into a bit of a panic, and I didn't know what to do. I stopped, and when I stopped, I could feel panting on my face, and it was the way that my dog used to do it, so I knew it was him. And that's what caused me to look into everything. I was always open to it. I'm not one to judge other people's walks in life, so I'll hear what you have to say. And there comes a point where it's okay, yeah, you're passionate about this and you believe in it, or know you're telling me a story. So if you can see the passion behind what they're saying and what they're delivering, you tend to believe it more than if somebody's fabricating something. There's an elderly lady that lives in my apartment currently. I've seen visions of her 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. It's weird because she's wearing her wedding dress.
Aw.
She's an Italian woman, very small, very frail, and we've come to figure out that it's through my landlord's bloodline. It is his great-grandmother. It's her spirit. I was over at his house over the Christmas holidays one year, and his mother was there, and she was showing old family albums and stuff like that. And I happened to recognize the dress and everything, and I'm like, who's that? She's like, that's my mother. I said, your mother lives downstairs.
Lives.
And she's like, no way. And it turns out that there's a special connection between her son, who is my landlord, and his great-grandmother. And that's pretty much why I've figured out that she is there. She's watching over the family and just taking care of them. She's just kind of there. She doesn't bother anybody. She doesn't do anything. You just see her every once in a while.
Did she used to live there?
Never. She lived in Italy her whole life.
Wow.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Not from the area. She never knew the area. She's a frail old lady, and she's kind of doing what Italian housewives, I assume, back then did. She would kind of walk around the kitchen a little bit, and it looked like she was puttering, and then she'd walk over to the kitchen table, and she'd putter over there a little bit, and then she'd go back to the kitchen, and she'd just walk back and forth from the table to the kitchen. It was really weird.
Thank you so much
No problem.
for sharing your stories and for making time to talk with us today, and for sharing your stories with everybody else, because we're all really interested in hearing this.
No problem.
It's good to get real stories from real people, you know?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.